Keiko-san, いらっしゃい、アルファベータに。
Alpha Beta for extra reduced prices.
Nobody talks turkey like Alpha Beta.
Once a trailblazer in the American grocery scene, Alpha Beta transformed shopping with its innovative self-service model and community-focused approach. In this video, we'll explore the fascinating journey of Alpha Beta, from its humble beginnings and rapid rise to prominence to the challenges it faced and its eventual decline. We'll uncover the key moments that shaped its legacy and the lessons learned along the way. Join us as we dive into what really happened to Alpha Beta. In 1915, a quiet transformation in American grocery retail began in Pomona, California, with the founding of the Alpha Beta store by Albert Gerard.
For your celebration, Alpha Beta has 100% natural Zaki or Foster Farms fresh California-grown tom turkey, 69 cents a pound.
Gerard launched the concept under the Alpha Beta Company, which would help reshape the way Americans shopped for groceries. Unlike the cluttered and clerk-dependent markets of the time, Alpha Beta aimed to offer greater efficiency and shopper autonomy. The name Alpha Beta wasn't merely a marketing gimmick. It reflected a novel operational strategy. Groceries were arranged alphabetically, allowing customers to find products quickly and with minimal assistance. In an era when most stores relied on clerks retrieving items from behind counters, this alphabetical layout was a bold departure. It encouraged self-navigation and offered a level of independence to shoppers, laying early groundwork for the self-service model, a concept being developed around the same time by pioneers like Piggly Wiggly, which formally launched in 1916. During the 1910s and 1920s, grocery shopping in the United States was typically a fragmented experience. Customers often moved between specialized vendors, a butcher for meat, a greengrocer for produce, and a separate shop for canned goods. While Alpha Beta did not initially offer the full supermarket format later popularized in the 1930s, it contributed to the evolution by offering a wider variety of packaged goods under one roof in a shopper-friendly layout. The growth of Alpha Beta coincided with a dramatic shift in the American economic and cultural landscape following World War I. The 1920s brought a surge in consumerism, driven by urbanization, rising incomes, and mass production. The rise of automobiles and suburban development changed shopping habits, with consumers beginning to favor centralized, one-stop shops. Alpha Beta tapped into this momentum by designing stores for speed and accessibility, often located near major roads or in developing suburban neighborhoods. Alpha Beta's early expansion was concentrated in Southern California, particularly in Los Angeles County. As the brand gained regional recognition, stores were gradually opened across California and into neighboring western states. By leveraging a straightforward formula, alphabetical shelving, competitive pricing, and a broad product selection, Alpha Beta became a familiar name throughout the West. A critical factor in Alpha Beta's long-term growth was its integration into larger retail networks. In 1961, it was acquired by the American Stores Company, a move that significantly expanded the brand's reach. This partnership provided the capital and infrastructure necessary to scale operations, while allowing Alpha Beta to retain much of its identity during the earlier phases of expansion. Long before digital point-of-sale systems, Alpha Beta relied on manual stock cards and inventory tracking to manage supply and demand. These methods, though basic by modern standards, enabled store managers to maintain inventory levels effectively and respond to shifts in consumer purchasing patterns, a logistical edge during periods of growth. From the 1930s through the 1950s, Alpha Beta's customer base largely consisted of middle-class suburban families, a demographic that expanded rapidly in the wake of World War II. The company targeted this group with coordinated marketing efforts, including radio spots, newspaper inserts, and community events. Its promotions often emphasized three pillars that resonated with mid-century shoppers: convenience, freshness, and savings. In terms of store design, Alpha Beta was notably forward-thinking. Early locations featured wider aisles, open refrigeration cases, and clearly labeled departments, all intended to make shopping more intuitive and less dependent on staff. These design choices anticipated many elements of modern retail ergonomics, prioritizing shopper clarity and efficiency long before the idea of user experience entered the business lexicon. How did a small store grow into a West Coast giant? Let's explore Alpha Beta's boom years. The mid-20th century marked the peak of Alpha Beta's influence, as the chain grew from a well-known regional grocer into a significant player in the western U.S. supermarket landscape.
If you love beef, you'll love the beef sale at Skaggs Alpha Beta. The savings are sizzling. Every single cut of beef is on sale.
With a clear strategy and a strong understanding of post-war consumer behavior, Alpha Beta capitalized on the sweeping cultural and economic changes reshaping California and its neighboring states. Its growth during this period wasn't merely rapid, it was deliberate, aligned with suburban expansion, automotive infrastructure, and emerging middle-class values. By the 1950s and 1960s, Alpha Beta had established a solid footprint across California, with stores in major urban centers such as Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco. Expansion into fast-growing states like Arizona and Nevada followed, targeting new residential developments and suburban communities fueled by post-war migration and housing demand. Stores were often located near freeways, subdivisions, and retail hubs to maximize visibility and convenience for automobile-reliant families. To enhance the shopping experience, Alpha Beta introduced in-store features such as bakeries, delicatessens, and specialty counters offering fresh bread, meats, and cheeses. While not the first to adopt such amenities, Alpha Beta was among the earlier West Coast chains to embrace this model, helping to create a more immersive, one-stop shopping environment that appealed to families seeking convenience and freshness. A key factor in Alpha Beta's growth was its branding strategy, which resonated strongly with the ideals of post-war suburban life. The company positioned itself as clean, modern, and family-oriented, traits that reflected the era's emphasis on domestic stability and upward mobility. Advertising frequently showcased wholesome imagery, smiling homemakers, well-stocked kitchens, and healthy children. Slogans focused on freshness, savings, and family values, building emotional loyalty with shoppers. Store placement was equally strategic. Rather than competing in densely packed urban cores, Alpha Beta prioritized car-accessible suburbs. Its stores featured free parking lots, wide aisles, and intuitive layouts, ideal for the emerging weekly shop model preferred by automobile-owning households. This shift toward bulk shopping fit perfectly with the evolving lifestyle of the 1950s and 1960s. Alpha Beta also adopted competitive pricing strategies, including the use of loss leaders, heavily discounted staples intended to drive foot traffic. Coupled with an efficient supply chain, these tactics helped the company attract cost-conscious shoppers and maintain an edge over smaller, independent grocers during periods of economic fluctuation. Behind the scenes, Alpha Beta emphasized consistency and professionalism. Store managers were trained in areas like merchandising, visual presentation, and customer service, ensuring that each location met the company's standards. This structured approach set Alpha Beta apart from many local grocery operations and contributed to its reputation for reliability. In its prime, the company also participated in co-branded marketing with national food manufacturers, local radio and television programs, and community events. Promotions included recipe booklets, collectible giveaways, and in-store tie-ins with major brands such as Kraft and General Mills. These efforts drove traffic and reinforced Alpha Beta's presence as a family-friendly, community-oriented retailer. By the 1960s, Alpha Beta had begun experimenting with early customer loyalty programs like S&H Green Stamps and promotional punch cards. These incentives rewarded repeat visits and encouraged higher volume purchases, early precursors to modern loyalty strategies. As Alpha Beta expanded, its scale and efficiency made it difficult for many small, independent grocers to compete. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, the grocery industry underwent a wave of consolidation, with many mom-and-pop stores either closing or being absorbed by larger chains. Alpha Beta was a major participant in this shift, helping to reshape the competitive landscape of American food retail. But even as Alpha Beta thrived, subtle signs of strain were beginning to emerge beneath its surface success. What challenges started to shake Alpha Beta's success? By the late 1970s and into the 1980s, the once prominent Alpha Beta grocery chain began to show clear signs of decline. What had started as a regional innovator, known for its alphabetical store layout and strong California presence, was becoming weighed down by outdated practices, strategic missteps, and an inability to respond effectively to shifting consumer behaviors and evolving retail technology. Though the company still maintained a visible footprint across the western U.S., the foundational cracks had begun to spread. One of the earliest warning signs came from intensifying competition.
So if you like beef and you like to save money, Alpha Beta's Big Beef Sale is on. Tell a friend.
National and regional chains like Safeway, Kroger, and Vons expanded their presence in Alpha Beta's core markets, leveraging broader infrastructure, more efficient supply chains, and stronger marketing capabilities. While Alpha Beta had long dominated in California and nearby states, it lacked the national reach and technological investment needed to stay competitive. Competitors began implementing private label brands and early inventory management technologies, tools that Alpha Beta was slower to adopt. Internally, the company struggled with management inefficiencies, made worse by shifting corporate ownership. After being acquired by American Stores in 1979, Alpha Beta operated under increasingly centralized strategies that often failed to reflect the nuances of local markets. Leadership turnover, short-term priorities, and a diluted brand identity weakened the operational consistency that had once defined the chain. Long-term innovation gave way to short-term cost-cutting. Equally damaging was Alpha Beta's inability to keep up with evolving consumer preferences throughout the 1980s. Shoppers were beginning to show increased interest in health-conscious options, ethnic foods, and specialty items, a trend that would grow more prominent into the 1990s. Emerging competitors like Trader Joe's and, later, Whole Foods began attracting customers seeking curated premium selections. Alpha Beta largely maintained its conventional product mix, missing early opportunities to pivot. Rather than reinforcing its existing strengths, Alpha Beta experimented with geographic expansion. These efforts delivered mixed results. In some cases, the company entered new regions without fully accounting for local preferences or market saturation. By the mid-1980s, Alpha Beta had begun withdrawing from certain states, such as Arizona, to refocus on California. These retrenchments reflected a retreat rather than successful growth and underscored a lack of strategic clarity. Labor costs added to the mounting pressure. As a unionized chain, Alpha Beta carried higher operational expenses compared to some non-union rivals. Contract negotiations could become contentious, occasionally disrupting store operations and affecting morale. While union representation ensured better working conditions, it also introduced financial challenges that leaner competitors were often better equipped to navigate. Technology was another area where Alpha Beta lagged. While other grocers began adopting barcode scanning and computer-based inventory systems in the 1980s, Alpha Beta continued to rely heavily on manual processes. This hindered efficiency, resulting in overstocked shelves, product shortages, and increased waste, issues that directly affected both customer satisfaction and profitability. Store aesthetics became a further liability. By the mid-1980s, many Alpha Beta locations appeared outdated. Dim lighting, narrow aisles, and worn interiors stood in contrast to the modern, brightly lit designs of newer competitors. As the grocery shopping experience became more immersive and visually appealing, Alpha Beta's failure to renovate its stores alienated younger, more discerning shoppers. The company also fell behind in product innovation. As competitors introduced international foods, organic selections, and gourmet-prepared meals, Alpha Beta's merchandise offerings remained largely static. This lack of evolution reinforced a growing perception that the brand was stuck in the past. Marketing, once an asset, also began to falter. The company clung to older slogans and relied heavily on traditional print advertising, while competitors embraced television campaigns, in-store promotions, and lifestyle-driven branding. As consumer media habits shifted, Alpha Beta's visibility and resonance in the market weakened. Finally, broader economic pressures exacerbated the company's troubles. The recessions of the late 1970s and early 1980s made consumers increasingly price-sensitive. Emerging discount grocers and warehouse clubs such as Price Club, founded in 1976, and Costco, founded in 1983, began drawing away Alpha Beta's budget-conscious base. Positioned awkwardly between premium service and deep discount pricing, the chain struggled to define a compelling value proposition. These compounding factors, intensified competition, corporate mismanagement, rising labor costs, outdated systems, and missed opportunities to evolve, gradually eroded Alpha Beta's standing in the grocery industry. Though it once played a pioneering role in shaping the Western U.S. retail landscape, Alpha Beta increasingly found itself outpaced by a sector it helped define. What caused Alpha Beta's decline? Let's look at the fall and loss of identity. The decline of Alpha Beta culminated in the 1990s, but its unraveling had begun much earlier, set in motion by a series of corporate decisions that eroded the brand's identity and severed its connection to longtime customers. What had once been a trailblazer in the grocery industry gradually became a corporate asset shuffled between owners, each reshaping the company to fit broader strategies.
ケイコさんいらっしゃいアルファベイラに
Alpha Beta for extra reduced prices.
Often at Alpha Beta's expense. The pivotal shift occurred in 1979 when Alpha Beta was acquired by Skaggs Companies, which soon merged with American Stores. While the acquisition was intended to expand American Stores' presence in the Western U.S., it introduced a strategic dissonance. Alpha Beta, once a community-centric chain with regional loyalty and operational independence, was now under the direction of executives whose decisions reflected national priorities rather than local needs. Efficiency and integration took precedence over preserving the distinctiveness that had earned Alpha Beta customer trust. One of the most damaging results of this transition was the loss of Alpha Beta's regional character. American Stores pursued a homogenized business model, gradually phasing out the unique features that had defined Alpha Beta, such as localized merchandising and a personable in-store experience. Though Alpha Beta had long moved beyond its original gimmick of alphabetized aisles, the brand had retained a reputation for accessibility and neighborhood familiarity. These qualities were increasingly diluted as standardized procedures and centralized oversight replaced local decision-making. In an effort to remain competitive, Alpha Beta underwent several rebranding attempts during the late 1980s and early 1990s. These included new logos, store renovations, and marketing efforts targeting younger, urban demographics. However, rather than reinvigorate the brand, these efforts often alienated existing customers. Longtime patrons viewed the changes as evidence that the chain had lost its identity. The updated branding lacked the authenticity and trust that had once defined Alpha Beta, and the new corporate tone felt disconnected from the communities the chain served. Compounding these challenges, American Stores acquired Lucky Stores in 1988, prompting federal antitrust scrutiny. As part of the resolution, American Stores was forced to sell off numerous Alpha Beta locations. In 1991, 145 stores were sold to Yucaipa companies, which began converting them into Food for Less locations. By 1994, the remaining Alpha Beta stores were either converted into other American stores banners like Lucky and Jewel Osco, or transferred to Ralph's following Yucaipa's merger with that chain. By 1995, the Alpha Beta name had effectively disappeared from the retail landscape. Throughout these transitions, Alpha Beta struggled to keep up with rapidly evolving retail technology. Competitors were investing in barcode scanning, real-time inventory systems, and loyalty databases to improve efficiency and personalize marketing. Alpha Beta, by contrast, was often overlooked in favor of American stores' flagship brands when it came to modernization investments. This technological lag translated into operational inefficiencies, missed promotional opportunities, and growing customer dissatisfaction. As the company's ownership changed and its nameplate disappeared from storefronts, brand loyalty eroded. Shoppers who had once relied on Alpha Beta for its community feel and consistent service now found themselves faced with unfamiliar banners, impersonal store experiences, and inconsistent pricing strategies. Meanwhile, new competitors, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, Costco, and Walmart, were rising fast, each offering a clearly defined identity, innovative retail environments, or aggressive pricing that Alpha Beta could no longer match. One of the most glaring issues in Alpha Beta's final years was its failure to differentiate itself amid a rapidly modernizing industry. While other chains embraced themes, specialty products, and experiential shopping, Alpha Beta had become a generic brand, lacking innovation, character, and relevance. The disappearance of Alpha Beta stores left lasting impacts on many communities, particularly in suburban and working-class neighborhoods where the stores had served as fixtures for generations. Jobs were lost, local economies were affected, and customers were left with few alternatives that matched the personal connection they once felt. In their place stood larger, more corporate grocery formats with little historical or emotional resonance. Retail analysts have pointed to Alpha Beta's demise as a textbook example of how not to manage a legacy brand in the face of changing market dynamics. The chain's slow adaptation, brand dilution, lack of investment in modernization, and failure to maintain community trust proved fatal. By the mid-1990s, Alpha Beta had ceased to exist in any meaningful form. What began as a pioneering grocery experiment in Southern California had become, by the end, a cautionary tale, absorbed, repackaged, and ultimately erased from the retail map. Now that Alpha Beta has vanished from shelves, its story serves as a warning. In retail, brand loyalty is not permanent, and even iconic institutions can vanish when they forget what made them beloved in the first place. What can we learn from Alpha Beta's end? Discover its lasting legacy. Alpha Beta may no longer occupy storefronts, but its legacy still echoes across the retail landscape. As one of the first adopters of the self-service grocery model, it helped define the modern American supermarket, where shoppers navigated aisles freely, selected products themselves, and checked out efficiently. What began in the 1910s as a bold experiment became the industry standard by mid-century. Alpha Beta's history offers a lasting lesson in brand fragility post-acquisition. When American stores took over in 1979, efforts to unify operations across brands diluted Alpha Beta's distinct regional identity. Personalized service, community connections, and a familiar store atmosphere were gradually replaced by cost-cutting and branding uniformity. Even though its original alphabetical layout was long gone, Alpha Beta's deeper identity still resonated, until it was lost, not to financial failure, but to strategic neglect. For modern retailers navigating mergers and rebranding, Alpha Beta is a cautionary tale. Erode what makes a brand unique, and customer loyalty can disappear, even in times of profitability. The chain's decline also reflects the dangers of falling behind technologically. While competitors in the 1980s and 1990s embraced barcode scanning, inventory systems, and loyalty programs, Alpha Beta lagged. American stores prioritized upgrades at other chains like Lucky, leaving Alpha Beta with outdated infrastructure. As consumer preferences shifted toward healthier options, global flavors, and immersive shopping experiences, Alpha Beta stayed rooted in convention. Analysts often cite the chain as a textbook case of mismanaged growth. Expansion into unfamiliar markets without strong research, combined with shifting leadership and diluted priorities, weakened its brand. Instead of solidifying its presence in core regions like California, Alpha Beta spread itself thin, undermining its long-term stability. Yet, Alpha Beta still evokes nostalgia, especially in California, where it once served generations. The bold red signage, neighborhood stores, and staff continuity made it more than just a grocer. It was a daily ritual and community hub. Many employees remained for decades, building lasting relationships that set the chain apart from today's high-turnover retailers. Ironically, elements of Alpha Beta's early model are resurfacing. Chains like Amazon Fresh and Whole Foods now emphasize curated selections, local sourcing, and community-focused layouts, principles Alpha Beta helped pioneer. The industry is shifting back toward trust, relevance, and human connection. From a marketing standpoint, Alpha Beta's failure also illustrates the risks of stagnation. As rivals modernized their branding and adopted digital strategies, Alpha Beta clung to dated slogans and traditional media. It failed to engage younger shoppers or reflect changing cultural values, leaving its image behind the times. Today's renewed interest in local grocers and farmers markets echoes Alpha Beta's original strengths: authenticity, transparency, and personal connection. Its story serves as both a warning and a reminder. Innovation must balance with identity, and retailers must remain tuned in to their customers. Though its stores are gone, Alpha Beta's imprint remains etched in the evolution of American grocery retail.